Sinbad the Sailor. Episode 1. The First Voyage. Chapter 1. A Life of Comfort. Long ago, in the great city of Baghdad, there lived a wealthy merchant named Sinbad. He lived in a beautiful house with gardens, fountains, and many servants. One hot afternoon, Sinbad was resting in his garden when he heard a man speaking outside the gate. The man was a poor porter. He carried heavy goods through the streets of Baghdad every day. His clothes were old and his face was tired from working under the hot sun. The porter set down his load, looked up at Sinbad's great house, and said sadly, "Some men live in comfort while others work from morning until night. Why is life so unfair?" Sinbad heard him and asked to bring the man inside. The porter was frightened. He thought he had offended the owner of the house. However, Sinbad welcomed him kindly. "What is your name?" Sinbad asked. "My name is Hindbad." "Sit with me, Hindbad," said Sinbad. "Eat and drink. You see my wealth, but you do not know how much danger and suffering I faced before I earned it." Hindbad looked surprised. Sinbad smiled and began to tell him the story of his first voyage. Chapter 2. Sinbad Wastes His Money. Sinbad began, "My father was a rich and successful merchant. When he died, he left me a large amount of money." Sinbad had everything he needed, but he did not use his money wisely. He bought expensive clothes, held great feasts, and spent his days with friends. For several years he lived carelessly. Little by little, his money disappeared. One morning, Sinbad looked around his house and realized that most of his wealth was gone. "What have I done?" he cried. "My father worked hard all his life, but I have wasted everything he left me." Then he remembered his father's warning, "To be old and poor is misery indeed." The words frightened him, but they also woke him up. He decided to change his life while he still could. He sold his fine clothes, his furniture, and most of his possessions. With the money, he bought goods that he could sell in foreign lands. Then he joined a group of merchants who were preparing to travel by sea. Sinbad had never been on a long voyage before. He was excited, but he was also nervous. At the port of Basra, the merchants carried their goods onto a large wooden ship. When everything was ready, the captain gave the order to leave. The sails filled with wind, and the ship moved slowly away from the shore. Sinbad's first adventure had begun. Chapter 3. The Island That Was Not an Island. At first, Sinbad found life on the ship difficult. The waves made the ship rise and fall, and he became terribly seasick. However, after several days, he began to feel better. The ship sailed across calm blue waters and stopped at different ports. At each place, Sinbad and the other merchants sold some of their goods and bought new ones. Sinbad enjoyed meeting people from distant lands. He saw unusual animals, tasted new foods, and heard languages he had never heard before. As the weeks passed, he became more confident. One morning, the sailors saw what appeared to be a small green island in the distance. "Land!" someone shouted. The captain looked at the island and ordered the sailors to move closer. The island seemed peaceful. It lay low in the water, with soft ground and small plants growing across its surface. Strangely, there were no tall trees and no birds. The merchants were happy to leave the ship for a while. They carried food, cooking pots, firewood, and baskets onto the island. Some men walked around and explored. Others lit a fire to cook their meal. Sinbad sat near the fire and enjoyed the warm sunlight. Then the ground moved. At first, Sinbad thought it was a small earthquake. The ground moved again, more violently this time. The plants shook, the cooking pots fell over. The fire spread across the dark surface beneath them. Suddenly the captain shouted from the ship, "Run! Return to the ship! That is not an island!" The merchant stared at him in confusion. "It is a giant sea creature," the captain cried. "It has slept on the surface for so many years that sand has settled on its back and plants have grown there. The heat of your fire has awakened it." The creature began to sink beneath the water. Everyone ran toward the ship. Some men reached the small boats. Others jumped into the sea and swam. Sinbad tried to follow them, but he was too far away. The creature sank deeper. Cold seawater rose around Sinbad's legs and then over his head. He kicked upward and swam with all his strength, just as the great back of the creature disappeared beneath the waves. Chapter 4. Alone in the Ocean. Sinbad struggled in the water. "Help!" he shouted. But the wind was strong, and the sailors could not hear him. The crew pulled the other merchants aboard. Then a strong wind carried the ship away, and in the confusion, no one realized that Sinbad was still in the water. Sinbad watched helplessly as the ship became smaller in the distance. "Do not leave me," he cried. Soon the ship disappeared. Sinbad was alone in the middle of the sea. The waves pushed him up and down. His arms grew tired, and he began to lose hope. Just then, a large piece of wood floated past him. It was one of the pieces of firewood the sailors had carried onto the creature's back, and it saved his life. Sinbad grabbed it with both hands. All day and all night, he held on to the wood while the wind and waves carried him across the sea. He was cold, thirsty, and exhausted. At sunrise, Sinbad saw land. The waves slowly pushed him toward a rocky shore. When his feet finally touched the ground, he tried to stand, but his legs were too weak. He crawled onto the beach and fell asleep. When he woke, the sun was high in the sky. Sinbad found fresh water flowing from a small stream. He drank and washed the salt from his face. Then he ate some fruit from the nearby trees. For several days he stayed near the beach and recovered his strength. Sinbad did not know where he was. He saw no houses, roads, or people. "Perhaps I will die alone on this island," he thought. However, he refused to give up. One morning he began exploring. Chapter 5. The Horse from the Sea. As Sinbad walked along the shore, he saw a beautiful horse tied to a tree. The animal was strong and well cared for. Sinbad knew that a wild horse would not be tied with a rope. "There must be people nearby," he said. Suddenly, a man appeared from behind some rocks. "Who are you?" the man demanded. Sinbad explained how he had fallen into the sea and been left behind by his ship. The man listened carefully. "You are fortunate to be alive," he said. "I am one of King Miraj's grooms. I care for his horses. Once a year we bring the king's finest mares to this lonely shore." The groom explained that wild horses sometimes rose out of the sea at night to meet the king's mares. The groom stayed hidden and did not disturb them. But when the horse from the sea tried to pull a mare into the water with it, they rushed out with shouts and noise and drove it back beneath the waves. Later, the mares gave birth to foals of wonderful strength and beauty, horses worth a king's treasure. That night, hiding behind the rocks with the grooms, Sinbad watched in amazement as a dark horse rose from the moonlit waves. "If I had come to this shore alone," he thought, "no one would ever have believed my story." The grooms took Sinbad to an underground shelter where they gave him food, clean clothes, and a place to rest. The next day, their work was finished, and they returned to the capital, bringing Sinbad with them. Chapter 6. The Court of King Miraj. The city was large and busy. Its streets were filled with merchants, sailors, servants, and travelers from many lands. The grooms told the king about the stranger they had found, and King Mihaj agreed to meet Sinbad. Sinbad bowed respectfully and told the king the story of the sleeping sea creature and his escape. King Mihaj was amazed. "You have survived a terrible danger," he said. "You may remain in my city for as long as you wish." Sinbad thanked him. Over the following months, Sinbad worked near the harbor. He helped record the names of ships and the goods they carried. He also spoke with merchants and sailors from many countries, and he saw and heard of many wonders. He learned of a nearby island called Castle, where every night the sound of drums could be heard across the water, though no one ever saw who played them. The sailors believed that a mysterious spirit lived there. Curious, Sinbad sailed out to see the island for himself. He found nothing strange on Castle, but on the way he saw fish far longer than the largest ship in the harbor. Surprisingly, these enormous creatures were easily frightened, and sailors could drive them away simply by knocking two pieces of wood together. He even saw a smaller fish with a head shaped exactly like an owl's. "The sea is full of marvels," Sinbad thought, "both beautiful and terrible." But even among all these wonders, Sinbad was not happy. Whenever a ship arrived from Baghdad or Basra, he asked about his homeland. However, no one could help him return home. Sinbad began to fear that he might never see Baghdad again. Chapter 7. The Lost Goods. One day, a large merchant ship entered the harbor. Sinbad went to the port as usual and watched the sailors unload boxes, cloth, spices, and other goods. Then he recognized the captain. It was the captain of the ship that had left him in the sea. Sinbad's heart beat quickly. He walked closer and saw several boxes marked with his own name. "Captain," Sinbad said, "why are you unloading those goods?" The captain looked at him but did not recognize him. "These goods belong to a merchant named Sinbad," he replied. "He fell into the sea during our voyage and drowned. I plan to sell his goods and return the money to his family in Baghdad." Sinbad smiled. "Captain, I am Sinbad." The captain stared at him. "That is impossible," he said. "I saw Sinbad disappear beneath the waves with my own eyes. How can I believe you? You only wish to take a dead man's goods." Then Sinbad described the ship, the merchants, and everything that had happened on the false island, details that only a man who had been there could know. The other merchants gathered around. Some of them recognized him. "It is Sinbad," one man cried. "He is alive!" The captain embraced him. "This is a miracle," he said. "I am sorry we could not save you." "You did what you could," Sinbad replied. "I do not blame you." The captain returned all of Sinbad's goods. Sinbad sold some of them in the city and made a good profit. He chose the finest things among his goods and presented them to King Miraj to thank him for his kindness. The king was pleased, and in return he gave Sinbad rare and precious gifts from his own land. After some time, Sinbad said farewell to the king and boarded the ship, trading at several ports along the way. At last the ship returned safely to Basra. From there, Sinbad traveled back to Baghdad. Chapter 8. Home Again. Sinbad was filled with joy when he saw his home city again. He sold the goods he had collected during his journey and earned far more money than he had taken with him. He bought a comfortable house and helped members of his family who were poor. He also gave food and money to people in need. "For a time I was satisfied with my quiet life," Sinbad told Hindbad. "I was grateful to be alive, and I promised myself that I would never return to sea." Hindbad smiled. That was a wise decision, he said. Sinbad laughed. Yes, it would have been wise. But little by little I grew tired of resting at home. I forgot the fear and suffering, and I remembered only the wonders I had seen. I wanted to travel again. He looked toward the garden fountain. Why I made that decision and what happened to me next is a story for tomorrow. Then Sinbad gave Hindbad a purse containing 100 pieces of gold. Hindbad could hardly speak. He thanked Sinbad again and again, and left the house with the purse held tightly in his hands, wondering what dangers Sinbad would face on his next journey. Theme: courage and perseverance can help people survive hardship. The story also shows that wealth and adventure may bring both opportunity and danger.